For me, the key thing is we are dealing with complex realities, and this requires complex solutions. And probably we need to be humble, all of us, all stakeholders, I am a scientist or a professional as a patient, about what we can contribute and what we can't. I think we need more people challenging the system practices and views. We need to be critical, but we need to be humble about what solutions we bring. I can try to identify holes, but it would be a bit naive for me saying, I have this solution. But I can bring a perspective. And I think by getting different stakeholders, manufacturing, developers, clinicians, patients into the same room and just looking at what is failing, what is working, what would be the ideal solution, we will be able to develop much better therapeutics.
Welcome back to the Smart Biotech Scientist. In part 1, Jesús Zurdo shared how becoming a leukemia patient rewrote his professional mission after 3 decades in biotech innovation. Now, as both treatment receiver and industry insider, he is tackling the manufacturing and delivery challenges head-on. Can point-of-care production work? Will allogeneic therapy solve scalability? What business models could actually democratize access? His patient urgency pushes these conversations beyond theory into practical solutions that could transform advanced therapy delivery. Let's continue. Are you juggling the complexities of CMC development while trying to enjoy the beauty of biotech? Have you ever wondered if there's a way to simplify bioprocessing? Welcome to the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast, where we're diving headfirst into the very challenges you face. We're breaking it down, demystifying the jargon, and giving you the keys to unlock your full potential. I'm your host, David Brohlman, and I get it. With 15 plus years in the biotech industry, I face the same challenges you do. There's a way to simplify and streamline so you can remove complexity, you can skip trials and errors, deliver without delay your groundbreaking therapy to clinics and market, and still enjoy every single step. Do you want to learn how industry experts and I did it? Grab a cup of coffee and your favorite notebook and pen. Now is the time to take your bioprocessing game to the next level. Let's smarten up biotech. I would like to talk about a slightly different aspect, but you said, well, in this frame, how can we do it without bringing the patient to the clinic to measure all these metrics? This leads me to this point, because we hear often about point of care manufacturing, especially with stem cells, CAR T, and so on. What is your perspective? How should this evolve, and how can this solve the affordability and, more importantly, the accessibility crisis?
I have some points of view, and I can share some experience that I come across. I'll tell you one big realization, and we were talking about, for me, realizing how stem cell registers have been operating for decades now very effectively, and how they provide cells to patients. You look at the quality assessment and the batch release. My dose of cells was a batch, and they had to do some testing before they released. But you cannot just do the classical sterility testing. You cannot do everything you would do traditionally in pharma. And talking to people, friends that are working in CAR Ts, that they have all this quality release, and that adds a lot of time. And that means that you need to freeze the cells, and you do all this testing, and then you release the batch, but you use lots of sample in testing, and then you go and take it to the patient. That adds a tremendous amount of time, that adds a tremendous amount of work and cost. Now, if you look at how some people are doing this point of care, and there's several examples here. Karen Cross promoting this. The hospital clinic in Barcelona, I think they treated 600 patients or something like that by now, which is pretty impressive out of a single hospital. There was this Galapagos was promoting something similar. Unfortunately, they stopped that. Then this is a different paradigm, because you have the apheresis at hospital, and then you use the fresh cells, you modify them, purify them, and immediately you put them back into the patient because you're using aseptic technologies. It's a question of risk assessment, which is what you always do in medicine. You need to test if you've done your validation upfront. And then what they see, the risk of infection because of bacteria or whatever virus is way into sample is negligible. Of course, you need to validate this. But once you've done that, that means that you cut time tremendously and you can do everything in the hospital. And the only thing you need is to have the viral vector. But this means that you can centralize the viral vector as the key ingredient, make sure the quality is right, and then decentralize the final manufacturing step. It brings down costs, it brings down time, and importantly, the patient doesn't have to wait so long. I mean, there are horrible examples of hospitals where patients die because they don't have the treatments fast enough. So to me, it's not necessarily the solution for everything, but clearly for autologous cell therapy, it could be a game changer. Not for everything, not for everybody, but in some cases, some experience showing that this has promise and is leveraging what is being in use for many years. I mean, don't reinvent the wheel. Just look at what people have been using. It works. Now let's look at the difficult stuff that is getting in the way.
And to what extent could we develop more allogeneic therapies? Obviously, it's not possible for everything, but maybe in certain cases, instead of an autologous therapy, we could move over an allogenic and then produce that centrally and ship it, for instance.
Well, we can, and there are examples. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem that the allogeneic cell therapies are getting traction. And I don't know, there are different problems. I mean, on one hand, not every allogeneic cell therapy is built the same way. And there's some cases where probably too much editing or, I remember, HLA knockouts are not a great idea because then your body thinks you're bringing another cancer. But there's some promises there. It can help in some regard, but I think, it's not going to be a magic bullet. What I like about allogeneic is that it's off the shelf. You have it ready. And that means that immediately you can give it to the patient. You shorten the intervention time. And I do believe that I hope there would be some, I don't know, whether it's gamma deltas, there's going to be NKs, or it's going to be an edited cell, or a combination of all this that would make it. There's promise there. However, I think probably in vivo cell therapy has more chances of succeeding. And my take on this is that I think it could revolutionize how cell therapy takes place. Maybe not how people say, because I had this conversation. It's going to bring costs down. I disagree. I mean, cost, yes, not price. Because we talked about this before. Pricing of medicines is different, and you look at what is the price of some viral therapies right now, which require tiny doses. Clearly, they do not represent the cost of manufacturing. However, one thing to me as a patient is transformational is you might not need to use conditioning or lymphodepletion in cancer, but also in autoimmune diseases. And this is huge. It's huge because it reduces risk to patients, it reduces mortality linked to infections, and this is really important, but also it reduces the impact of some of this chemo in your brain, in your body generally. You're stronger. You're able to deal with things in a better way. And also, I like the flexibility that brings. You can be very creative. You can bring multiple cars. You can do multiple dosings. Now, the issue I think that probably we are not considering enough is the delivery. The delivery remains a problem. And no matter how much engineering we would do into the vectors, doesn't matter which SLNPs, some viral vectors, there's going to be always some off-target delivery. And this is something we've seen in ADCs in the past. And there were issues with heart toxicity and liver toxicity, etc. Now, when we're having genetic medicines, this is a different story. If your cargo is integrated or has a genetic impact in the wrong cell type, maybe that is not desirable. I mean, maybe I'm worrying unnecessarily, but the problem is translating observations from a lab or animal model into a patient is not trivial. However, there are options like ex vivo at bedside that people are exploring. And I'm a firm believer that in vivo and the right delivery and the right vehicles could transform completely how autoimmune and how some oncology conditions are treated. I mean, I'm really hopeful. I am impressed about the results people are observing.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's also amazing to see how fast it moves, how fast it evolves. When you look across the industry, Jesús, what are the trends you see with respect to new manufacturing technologies, with respect to new delivery methods, with respect to new ways to bring the drug to the patients? What is hot right now? Or where do you think the industry is moving to?
I think this is where I'm a bit disconnected, and I don't know if I'm old-fashioned, but we were talking about overengineering or is just what is the purpose of the innovation you're introducing? And I need to be careful. I think automation, there are beautiful solutions out there. More companies getting solutions. It's very impressive what these platforms can do. And I think automation has a place, even at point of care manufacturing, because that means that you reduce risks, you reduce the human elements. So what I was saying before, people are putting too much emphasis in this. Automation is not a solution to price of drugs, but it is an important element to introduce in manufacturing consistency. But the problem is that it has to be agnostic. You should be able to use whatever automation for a given product. So you're not having to go through the barrier or buy new equipment in order to manage different cell therapies you are administering out of a single hospital. And this is a problem the industry has to reckon with. We need to have standards. We need to have, like in computers, I suppose, everybody can use a USB port. So we have an understanding what are the product starting the aphoresis, you will, that people can start with. And then you have whatever automation solution, but the standards are maintained. The other, I think, is, we were talking about in vivo. There is lots and lots of work done, and it's fascinating what people are doing these days with these nanoparticles and how they're engineered. Again, I think they have a place. I think they are super cleverly designed. Some of them is fascinating how much science is put in there. My question is, again, are we over-engineering these things? What problems are we solving? I was talking before about delivery. These solutions, sometimes they retain significant delivery challenges, but also other aspects about durability of response, etc. We are maybe trying to get the perfect solution before finding what is the real problem. And I was saying maybe a hybrid between in vivo and ex vivo is something that would have a bigger impact and produce a much better outcomes to patients. Going back to patient urgency, rather than going for a super sophisticated technology that would require lots of testing and validation. If I have a new, and I don't want to demonize nanoparticles, the same goes with viral vectors. Doesn't matter which platform you have. If I have a super innovative delivery platform, I would need to show that it's safe, that it doesn't go to the wrong place, etc. And then the question is, which patient will accept to be treated? I'm talking about a patient that is not suffering or a healthy volunteer, you will. It becomes challenging. I would not volunteer for that, but it has to be tested. What are the limitations of these platforms? At the same time, we have solutions that are already working. So why don't we combine some of these super cleverly designed vectors with simpler platforms that can ensure fast adoption in the clinic, and then see what we can do with in vivo cell therapy or ex vivo or bedside or whatever. To me, that is the challenge, is being pragmatic and recognize the urgency and go step by step. Let's make sure we can validate the physiological effect, and then we refine the delivery in due time.
What do you think will have the biggest impact right away? Because my feeling is there's a lot to be done. It will take time. Is there something that stands out that you think will have an immediate effect and will move the needle significantly?
Two things. Healthcare provider capacity. You cannot make a significant improvement in the adoption of cell therapies if hospitals cannot administer to patients. And this is something that is hidden. People assume it's not just pricing. You could price it whichever way you want, but if the hospital cannot give it to patients because they don't have the right infrastructure, the training, or the capabilities, forget it. It will never happen. And now we see it in Europe, purely problematic in the UK, when our healthcare systems are limited in the amount of money they receive. You tell them you need to invest now in building capabilities, for example, for autologous, which is what is right now, also maybe in the future for other types of cell therapies, then who's going to pay for that? So that is a big, big bottleneck. The other, maybe making it, I'm so hopeful looking at some bold clinical trials. Unfortunately, not many in Europe or in the US. I see brilliant things being done in China. Innovation that is coming out of China is unbelievable. Using some of these treatments as first line, and is mind-blowing what they observe in some conditions. You need to take things with a pinch of salt, but it's how they combine I'm more familiar with the CAR T arena, how they combine multiple CARs, how they administer the treatment, how they combine with other drugs. And there are cases where they're using this as first line for multiple myeloma, for ALL, in some cases without the need of chemo. And they see some impressive remission and good survival without symptoms. And this is really important for me. Now, early days, but I think this to me, it shows the promise. This could be really revolutionary. But I know we need to be prudent. We cannot just go completely crazy. But I think there's a case for some conditions to really move these treatments earlier. This is another thing I found out as being a patient. Yes, it's good to have another weapon, if you will, in reserve if the first line of treatment fails. The problem is that these treatments are really, really hurting patients. By the time they are eligible, because they have maybe a couple of relapses already, they have issues with their kidneys, they have liver problems, and that means that they are too weak in some cases to accept or to receive these therapies. And even if you said, we're going to try anyway, it's less likely they will survive it. So if we were using these treatments early on, maybe we would give them a better chance to survive the disease. And I think this is maybe change in. And I know many clinicians are already promoting this, but they are a bit alone. I mean, there's lots of things need to happen from a regulatory perspective, from a health economics perspective, from a payer's perspective, that makes it acceptable to provide these treatments early on. And I think this could be transformational. I also believe that we need to do better, or we need to do more to improve the cell therapies that are already in the clinic. They are brilliant, but they are not as fantastic as many people think. But we have new knowledge, and this is why I think it's important that patients are treated, because we learn. We learn when they work, when they don't. We learn about the limitations, and that will help innovation. That would help, second or third generation of therapies.
Yeah, I believe that if we figure out the economic side and then obviously some other safety side to use these powerful new modalities early on, earlier treatment, and also, as you said, first in line and not end in line.
Yeah,
I think this will be a total game changer. I do hope that we're getting there sooner than later. So this has been great, Jesus. Before we wrap up, what burning question haven't I asked that you're eager to share with our biotech community?
For me, I think you touched really the important stuff. I think there were very pertinent questions to the point. For me, the key thing is we are dealing with complex realities, and this requires complex solutions. And probably we need to be humble, all of us, all stakeholders, I am a scientist or a professional, as a patient, about what we can contribute and what we can't. I think we need more people challenging the existing practices and views. We need to be critical, but we need to be humble about what solutions we bring. I can try to identify holes, but it would be a bit naive for me saying, I have this solution. But I can bring a perspective. And I think by getting different stakeholders, manufacturing, developers, clinicians, patients into the same room and just looking at what is failing, what is working, what would be the ideal solution, we will be able to develop much better therapeutics. And particularly, I want to emphasize patient side. For me, it has been enlightening, how you use these therapies and why people are not receiving it, or when they're eligible, what happens, why the efficacy can be down. Well, because the reality, the experience in the clinic and at home. And I think this will increase the value of our efforts 100-fold, no doubt about it.
Jesus, what is the most important takeaway from our conversation today?
I would say, remember, we all are or will be patients. This is important. It's not I'm a scientist or I'm a professional or I'm a clinician and then I'm working for somebody else's benefit. No. At some point in my life, I will be a carer, I will be a patient. And this, I think, brings an element of humanity and urgency as well. It's not okay to hope or wait for a number of years, going back to urgency, because patients matter and the need happens now. Cutting corners is not the solution, but it's finding what is the big issue we are facing. So if we see that when we work with patients, we're working with ourselves, when that will be us in a few years, or is now, or it was us in the past, I think that would change the conversation.
What a great way to conclude our fantastic conversation, Jesus. patients do matter. Thank you for reminding us that patients matter. And finally, what we're doing as scientists is for the patient at the end of the day. And thank you also for giving us this perspective that goes beyond just the science. Finally, we're serving the patients that desperately need these life-saving therapies. And thank you also for sharing your own personal experience. Very powerful.
Thank you, David.
Where can people get a hold of you, Jesus?
Well, I think I've shared with you my email address. The easiest is to find me on LinkedIn and message me, and easy to reach through LinkedIn. And I would encourage anybody that has ideas, interests, initiatives, or willing to collaborate, please reach out. I think we're all in this together. I'm really happy to work with other people in finding better solutions.
Smart biotech scientists, please reach out to Jesus. You find the infos in the show notes. And thank you once again, Jesus, for being on the show today.
Thank you, David. It's been my pleasure, and thanks a lot for hosting me.
Jesús Zurdo just gave us a masterclass in reimagining how we manufacture and deliver advanced therapies. His unique vantage point as both innovator and patient reminds us why solving these challenges matters beyond the lab. If this conversation sparked ideas for your own work, we'd love a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us reach more scientists. And if you need support in development or the manufacturing of advanced therapies or biologics, please check out the links in the show notes. We are here to help you, and thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll see you next time. All right, smart scientists. That's all for today on the Smart Biotech Scientist podcast. Thank you for tuning in and joining us on your journey to bioprocess mastery. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. By doing so, we can empower more scientists like you. For additional bioprocessing tips, visit us at smartbiotechscientist.com. Stay tuned for more inspiring biotech insights in our next episode. Until then, let's continue to smarten up biotech.